We've been missing you. Do you want to find the witch friends you've been missing? Do you want to participate in these conversations live? And do you want to support the work of recovering a true history of feminist ideas about magic? Do you want to hang out? Do you want an invite to Zoom together with Amy and myself every new moon, along with our hilarious, diverse, wise, queer, creative, anti-racist, science, and awe-loving coven? You must join the Missing Witches Patreon. It's pay what you can, and we can't wait to meet you there. Patreon.com/missingwitches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Welcome guests, welcome friends, welcome listeners, welcome witches, welcome practitioners, welcome researchers, welcome history makers and historians and storytellers, welcome poets, welcome sisters and coven mates and artists, great conjure gatherers, conference makers, huge community movers. Welcome to the Missing Witches Coven. Welcome to the great coven that's out there in the great circle in the dark we make between our ears with all our listeners and all our sharing. For this Black History Month in 2022, we want to call in our ancestors. We want to hear and uphold their names. We want to hold them together. And we want to learn what you think they want to teach us and what you're learning right now. And get better educated and be better. That's our small goal. And we have the best possible guides. All of these incredible, incredible people we've gotten to meet over the years who gave us a little bit more of their time today.
Thank you all so much for being here. The faces are joy incarnate. I'm so happy to be here. I'm hoping to be largely silent today, but I really do just want to open the circle with Risa by saying thank you so much for being here with us today.
We asked our coven mate and collaborator and always teacher and friend, Zoe Flowers, if she would open this circle today by sharing a poem.
Earth, we are the elements. Stay close to the ground, omnipresent. 6 feet under, our mother's blood courses through our veins, out our wombs, down our legs, feeding hungry soil. We are dirty with your sadness, different from anyone you know, omnipotent. We lick wounds and swallow sorrows, name ourselves goddess, are not afraid of the dark, call on God, angels, and ancestors when shit gets tight. We are round, full-figured, full of ourselves. Water. We bathe in basil and sea salt. We're shackled but jump ship anyway. Sharks fed on our flesh. We are ocean now. You eat us unknowingly, thinking you can drink us in. Believe you can suck us dry and quiet our storms, but we are Oya. Settling accounts, we are Ma'at, shifting. You can't box us in, pin us down, or tell our story. Fire. We eat men whole when given the chance. Burn sage, incense, candles, tools of the trade. Dance under moons full, we are loud, alive, stretch things out to fit our shape. You itch to see us put in our place. We are witch, wise woman, and crone, burned at the stake. Air. But we are immortal. Reincarnated in the poems of our daughters, we are phoenix. Eyes in the back of our head, we are Sankofa bird. Live betwixt worlds, float through walls that you build around us, blowing cigar smoke in your face. We are juke joint. Speak out both sides of our mouths. See your future in eggshells. It's not looking good for you. Familiars at our side, we tag Miami, Haiti, and New Orleans in chalk circles. Drink with Legba at the crossroads. Walk on water, masquerading as poet, artist, and mama. We eat too many carbs, fall in love with men who are afraid to love us back, and turn our crooked noses up at your traditions. Jazz, poetry, and Sade are our religions. We are Black Cat crossing your path, that poem you wish you were smart enough to write, the rhyme you're too afraid to spit, fucking up the mood. We are the ejaculation that comes too quickly, gas on a crowded elevator, the uninvited party guest flirting with your boyfriend and eating all your food. An inconvenient truth, we are those shoes you can't afford to buy, that thing you hate but can't let go, those pants that are too tight around your waist now, the song that keeps playing in your head, that chick you know you're not good enough to bang, the one your mama warned you about. We are trouble, urban sprawl haunting your daydreams. We are muse, inspiring you to get your game up, teaching by example. We are root worker, obia lady, and conjure woman, the scary broad living at the end of the road alone, glamoring you through forked tongue. We make miracles, and yes, motherfucker, we do ride on brooms. You should be afraid of women like us. Chastity belted, we fuck anyway, do what we want to do, walk butt naked in the daytime and coming to you at night, carrying blessings and justice in our left hand, machetes and curses in our right. In praise of the witch. Thank you.
Ugh. Thank you so much, Zoe. I don't know if you could see because you were reading, but you had such full body nods. You had such a physical response from all of us. Thank you for reading that again. I'll probably have you back to read it 7 more times. Let's just fucking say it louder every time. I love it. Would you start? Would you share an ancestor story with us, Zoe?
Sure. You know what? I was thinking about Zora Neale Hurston. Because we've been doing these Black Witch highlights, and tomorrow is Zora Neale Hurston. And I was just thinking about what it must have been like for her to go to the places that she went and excavating those stories. And I was thinking about when I read her books, I was young, so I didn't realize it was ancestor veneration. And so I was just thinking about that as I was just like writing. I was like, wow, she was like, you know, bringing me in to influence like the work that I'm doing now and other creators. So I want to call, you know, Zora Neale Hurston in.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to, should we make a daisy chain? We were thinking this time rather than Amy and I talking every time. Do you want to call someone else in?
Yeah, sure. I want to call in Caress.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm calling in my grandmother. She's not anyone special to the rest of the world, but to me in my line, she is all. She is all. And she is constantly with me, constantly reminding me that my first magics happened in the kitchen and reminding me that that is where my magic belongs. So healing through food.
Caress, before you invite someone else, for those listeners who missed the first time you were on Missing Witches, can you tell us who you are and what your project is?
Thank you. There have been some changes. My focus is now back where it should be, health and healing, primarily through what we put in our mouths, hence the focus on the kitchen. I am Caress Fitch, also known as Caress Mindful, and I am a holistic health coach. And my biggest project right now is the Swell Expo happening on March 19th, where we're bringing healthy sexuality into the conversation about health and wellness. And that's at swellexpo.co, and my website is mindfulpassions.co as well. And I think I've touched all the bases. Did I get them all, Risa and Amy?
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Awesome.
Let's circle back before we circle forward. Zoe, will you tell us more about your projects and what you're working on these days? I forgot that bit. I was just so excited to get started.
Yeah, no, thank you. My name is Zoe Flowers. My pronouns are she and her, and I am calling in today from the original land of the Podunk people, one of the many nations in Connecticut. And so the work that I'm working on now, I am a poet, so I do have a couple of books out. One is In Praise of the Witch, and that's pure poetry. And the other one is From Ashes to Angels, that's a journey through womanhood. And that is a series of interviews that I did with survivors of sexual violence, survivors of color, and documented stories. So I've been doing domestic violence work for 20 years now, and I would say over the past 5 years, I've been shifting more into the healing and wellness space full time. So I'm also a healing practitioner. Oh, and my website is imzoeflowers.com.
Caress, you want to circle us forward now that we've circled back?
I would love to. And I would like to call on Dr. Beverly.
Thank you, Caress. I am Beverly Smith. Hello, everybody. I'm also known in conjure circles as Dr. Beverly. For those who are not aware of conjure, and I know our esteemed panel is probably well aware of hoodoo, but for the listeners who may not be aware of hoodoo, hoodoo is an African American herbal magical path. We call upon the power of herbs and the power of our deities. And in the hoodoo circles, the overwhelming deity is Jesus Christ. I myself am not a Christian, but I understand the power of invocation. I am from a Christian background, raised Christian, became a Druid for almost 30 years, still have that Druidic connection to the land, but I wanted something ancestral for my spiritual path. And I've always, since I was a child, been drawn to liberation. If people ask me what my religion is, it's liberation and justice. I work towards liberation and justice, and right now, that is my greatest focus. An ancestor that I would consider very important in my life was my grandmother. My grandmother was a staunch Christian, a Seventh-day Adventist, all right? And she was a staunch Christian, and she always told us, beware of the obeah woman. The obeah woman is the medical herb, medicinal and magical practitioner of Jamaica. My family on both sides are Jamaican. I'm first generation American, and I'm very proud to not be afraid of the obeah woman, to not be concerned about the obeah woman, but I've become an obeah woman, which is it's very delightful to me, because while my grandmother always said, beware, 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 she was teaching me so much about herbs. She was teaching me so much about, as Caress says, health and healing coming from your kitchen. Coming from your kitchen. You do not need fancy preparations. You do not need to get on the big herbal websites and find herbs that will give you the spiritual and magical protections and the health and the healing and the attraction and the uncrossing that you need. You can go to the grocery store, to the spice aisle, and that is where my focus is now. It's helping my clients and my students reclaim the old ways. Some of these old ways that came with us on the transatlantic passage when we were brought over as enslaved people. These old ways came with us. And while they did not have access to the same herbs that we have access in the New World, they brought those knowledges of those herbs forth. And my mission right now is in the interest of pursuing liberty, in the interest of pursuing accountability, in the interest of pursuing protection and freedom. I am teaching the old ways because I believe that what Dr. King said is right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I'm happy to join this panel and to listen to these esteemed voices and to see where we have meetings of the mind and where all of our ancestors join in the points of light, like the constellations and the stars. So thank you for having me. And I'm very happy to be here. Oh, should I call somebody?
Sure.
All right.
And
Let
if
me
you,
see. Let me see. Let me see. Let me
yeah,
see.
you call somebody. And also if you want to share her name, if you want to share your grandmother's name.
Oh, her first name was Gertrude.
Good.
That's all I'm going to share, because like I said, she was a very staunch Christian. So I'm going to respect her, because that's what we do with our ancestors. We don't diss their ways. We understand that their power came from their belief structures, and we give respect and we give honor to that. So to my dear departed grandmother, Miss Gertie, as they called her, I love you. I give you respect and honor, and thank you for setting me on a path of self-understanding and self-love. And now I will call, let's see. Oh, I hope I get the professor's last name right. Professor Chiro?
That's me.
All right. Thank you. Take the floor.
Oh, this is wonderful. Risa, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for, I think Black History Month is important. I don't think it should be political in any way, but here we are. So this is just a wonderful acknowledgement of this time. And I'm blown away at the energy. So let me just say, I wish we had hoodoo covens. We do have hoodoo covens. They're
You
local,
do?
they're emerging locally, but I'm looking at the energy around here and I'm saying, wow, is there an organization? Is there something where we can all draw upon each other? So I again, thank you for bringing us together. I don't have much to say. I will bring in Zora Neale Hurston and Lucille Clifton as my ancestors. They are my inspiration. Valerie Boyd, who was Zora Hurston's biographer, recently passed, so I call her name too. I'm really about documenting this creative spirituality, this consciousness that we call hoodoo, we call the divine feminine, the divine Black feminine. I want to tell the story so it'll be there, right? For those who come after us. So, I'm a chronicler, I'm a historian, I'm an artist. I'm all the I hope to be 1/10 of the scholar that Mother Zora was, but I really am about taking the past, taking the words of our mothers and fathers and our foreparents and bringing them into the present. And that means documenting them, creating archives of what they did. So I'm most comfortable engaging with the dead in the archive. And that's where you can get to know them. That's where they speak to you. And that is actually where too we can recover the voices of people who have been lost to us. And that's really where I am. It means that we're entering into this powerful cycle where we are reclaiming the dead and bringing their wisdom into the present. And I think that's a beautiful thing for all people, but specifically for Black people in America, where there's been a chain that's been broken. This is a way of sort of creating those connections once again. So that's what I'm about. I have so many current projects, I'm not even going to mention them, except to say that I'm entering into my crondom. I'm loving it. I had no idea that as you get older, it gets even better. And I become more reflective about what's going on in the world and the relationship of these beautiful magical spiritualities. I would like to see something before I leave the planet, and I don't plan on leaving the planet until I'm 90. My mother actually, and that's another story, she said, "I'm not going to pass till I'm 90. Y'all get ready." We gave her a party on her 90th birthday, and the next morning she was gone. So that is the power of speaking your life and death into existence. But I plan on staying here for a little while. And one thing I would like to see before I leave is a reclaiming of magical spirituality, not as religion, but as a power, not even as an alternative to religion, but as a power that is central to how we think and how we are in the world. And when I say we, I'm talking about humanity. Magic has been, as all of you know, has been pushed to the side. The divine feminine has been neglected, hurt, tortured. But the divine feminine is here again. And so I feel that there is a calling out for us to bring the spirit of magic into the present. And that's something I want to see happen in the world. Before I move on, I'll do whatever I can to make it happen. Some of you know I'm a religion professor. I would like to see I would like to be a magic professor. I would like to see the real discipline of magic again come to the fore in how we think of ourselves in the world, as something that is useful, healing, that supports human flourishing in different ways. So that's a mouthful. I'm rambling. I'm enjoying this female energy. It's like as soon as and I don't know anyone here, but as soon as Zoe, when you opened your mouth, it came right through. It's like that's power. And I'm not just saying, I'm not just talking shit. That's a power. So we want to harness that. And I'm just so excited about that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think I'm going to pass this on to my beloved and beautiful Marcelite, who is a friend and a mentee and someone that I want to hear from.
Thank you, Dr. Shiro. Yes, I love that about documenting these practices. I'll introduce myself, but I recently read The Year of the Witching. Oh, y'all, I highly recommend it. I haven't read fiction in a while, but kind of coming to that divine feminine power, it's a powerful book that I highly recommend. So my name is Marcelite Ayala. I am a scholar, a researcher. I study African heritage religions, African traditional and African derived religions. I am based in Atlanta right now. My research is kind of along what Dr. Shura was saying about, I study Black witchcraft. I am a practitioner of hoodoo and Ifa. And I'm interested in the ways that people use these spiritual technologies for healing, for resistance. And my most recent focus has been on materializing abundance. I'm interested in these conversations around manifestation and prosperity gospel and all of these things. So let's see. So the ancestor that I wanted to bring in was bell hooks. Freaking bell hooks, So recently, what a sad passing. She shaped so much of how I understand myself as a radical, as a queerdo, as a feminist, a Black feminist. I grew up in a very conservative rural town outside of Portland, Oregon. And a friend of mine kind of randomly gave me Ain't I a Woman, Black Woman and Feminism. And my world was changed. I had some deep conversations with my mom, who grew up in a Black nationalist kind of, I think a heteronormative, homophobic household that often kind of comes with that Black nationalism. And had a lot of deep conversations about Black feminism and why it's important. And that it doesn't, I remember her responding and saying one time, that doesn't it divide the movement? Doesn't it divide Black women and Black men? And we had some deep conversations about intersectionality and patriarchy and Black nationalist movements and the differences between white feminism and Black feminism. But I was 19 at the time, and I was understanding her writing. And I think that was the beauty, and especially now with the spiritual community, that was the beauty of bell hooks, right? It was that it wasn't just in her brilliance, it was her accessibility. It was how she reached so many of us, and how I was able to have these conversations with my mom and understand her work. And I think that has translated to the spiritual community now, right? Like we're understanding our spiritual practices through a lens of race, class, and gender. We're not just burning sage without thinking about cultural appropriation, right? We're not just thinking about manifestation without considering individualism and prosperity gospel and hyper-consumerism and capitalism. This is kind of a part of our conversations now, thanks to scholars, thanks to thinkers like bell hooks. So yeah, so I was thinking about her, and I was thinking about this comment that this quote that she shared, particularly as I'm thinking about manifestation. She says in Sisters of the Yam, Black Women in Self-Recovery, she says, what would it mean for Black people to collectively believe that despite racism and other forces of domination, we can find everything that we need to live well in the universe, including the strength to engage in the kind of political resistance that can transform domination? So if we think about that, right, in terms of how we are manifesting, how we are co-creating, how we are envisioning the worlds that we want to create, that we are like casting our spells and doing our rituals for, we can think about it along this like politics of liberation. And I think that that's what bell hooks gave us. She gave us this integration between the political and the spiritual. That's everywhere. It's like, it's all over social media now. This is the conversation. I think, Dr. Sherrill, we are here. And I think, the Academy has yet to catch on, but we're here. So yes, so thank you for having me. This is a wonderful group of people.
Thank you so much. Nadra and Kenya are among our invited guests as well.
Yes, I'll call on Nadra.
Hi, my name is Nadra Niddle, and I am the author of Toni Morrison's Spiritual Vision. And that book discusses both Toni Morrison's life and literature and her attempts to preserve African American folklore, as well as West African folklore and African American practices like hoodoo, and her engagement of magic generally, both in her life and in her fiction. And her birthday is in Black History Month. It recently passed. So she's the ancestor who's on my mind right now, as well as actually bell hooks. I recently signed a deal to write about bell hooks and the role of spirituality in her life as well. And one of the reasons that came about is because in my book about Toni Morrison, I mentioned bell hooks a few different times. And one quote I would like to share that I referenced in the Toni Morrison book was bell hooks discussing the importance of the Black divine feminine. And so one thing she wondered in her book, Homegrown, Engaged Cultural Criticism, which was published in 2006, is what it would take to reimagine, quote, the Black female, not as whore, bitch, bearer of violence, but as bearer of the sacred, the healing, the inspiring. And in that book, she also lamented the fact that, quote, African Americans have not been interested in reclaiming representations of Black Madonnas, end quote. So the Black Madonna is a figure that Toni Morrison also engaged in books like Sula, Paradise, and it really comes up throughout her works, but I would say especially in those two books, we see examples of the Black Madonna, the Dark Virgin. Sometimes she mentions it as a multicolored Madonna or Virgin. There's references to that as well throughout her body of literature. And so I think that that's something that is inspiring to me, just, revering the Black feminine and recognizing the Black divine feminine and recognizing that divine femininity in other Black women I encounter, as well as in myself. So with that, who was the last person who needs to be called on? I'm sorry.
Kenya Koviak.
Oh, Kenya.
unable to unmute. Do you want to try jumping off and back on again? Sometimes that helps.
Okay, so while we wait for Kenya to return, Dr. Shiro, I hadn't heard that Valerie Boyd had died. So I want to bring her name back into the circle. I know that she said that she wrote Wrapped in Rainbows because Zora told her to. And so maybe as another question after we hear from Kenya, I want to know what your ancestors are telling you to do, and maybe what your ancestors are telling you to tell us, in the spirit of Valerie Boyd's Wrapped in Rainbows and in her honor. And there's Kenya. Hi, Kenya.
Does it work now, Kenya?
Yes, I am unmuted.
Yes.
I came in and interrupted what she was saying, and I didn't want to do that.
No, you're perfect. We wanted to spiral forward and now spiral back to make sure that we have your voice. Please tell us about your work and your projects, what ancestors are coming through for you. It's so nice to see you again.
Hi, it's good to see you. My name is Kenya Koviak, Kenya T. Koviak. And the ancestor that's coming through for me is Missouri Elizabeth. And that's a long story. She is an indigenous ancestor as well as an African American ancestor. She's Eidos, because our family is mixed. So she would be, in nowadays terms, Muskogee and African, but she's actually Creek. We use the word Creek in my family. And she's often here. She watches over my daughter. She visits, even though I try to keep my home very locked down. She's like who are you trying to keep out? So I can't do anything about that. She gonna come when she wants to come. And I had to learn to deal with it and figure out who she was. Because I was like, okay, who is this woman? Because you have to understand, she would be my great grandmother. And my grandma was 100 and something, 100. So we are long lived. So that's going back quite a ways. I am an African American witch and practitioner. When I use the word witch, I want to be clear, because the word witch is a word that we have at our arsenal or in our repertoire, because the words that we would use individually for each tribal designation are lost to us. So we use the language that we have available to us. And for me, it's English. And for me, linguistically, the closest thing that I could use would be witch. And even under that, I would be closer primarily to a cunning woman if I were to try to use a phrase that might be more familiar to people. But I do use hoodoo because that's what I grew up in. And again, this is where I divide against other people. I'm just gonna let you know now, I'm a little controversial. Yes, I practice hoodoo. However, I believe that hoodoo is the merchandise version of it. It's the one for the merchants to sell to people, because people have polluted hoodoo in a large amount by other cultural practices. Whereas African American folk magic is a little bit more defined and a little bit more specific, that I'm saying that these are traditions that are passed down and still growing and modifying and still, revitalizing from the past, present, and the future, that we can expect from the next generations, our own particular and our own specific kind of magic. Projects that I'm working on right now. I have a podcast on Anchor FM called My Magical Cottage Core Life. It's kind of an exercise in kindness. It's giving me a chance to not focus per se just on magic. There are some hidden episodes for my practitioners. I don't let everyone get to those. Also, I'm working on a book. Many of you may know that I used to write for Pagan Business Network and Pagan Business Network News. Those are currently on hold. And I also am the person behind the Detroit Conjure and Folk Magic Festival. The movie that was being made for it is not going to happen, though. I'm sorry, we lost part of the footage, and it's not practical. And I am currently working on a novel that incorporates many of the magical traditions as well as indigenous traditions of Michigan and folklore and folk magic and herbalism into it. I'm not sure what you would call it, My friend wants to call it Michigan Gothic. There's a lot of magic, a lot of spiritism, a lot of animism, and some things that are not of humankind in this book. However, it's very strange because this book doesn't feel like I'm writing it. The characters come to me almost the same way as certain spirits come to me. And I've actually received knowledge writing this book that I've had to look up and say, well, wait a minute, where does that come from? And I literally have to go through books that are a couple of 100 years old. And I find out, oh, there's folklore regarding this. This is why you wrote that. And I'm like, okay, that's not me. That is not me. That is absolutely not me. So I think this book is a little bit more than a book. And all the characters are African American. They're all African American, except one of the villains. And that's not because they're not African American, because the big bads are actually, the evils are actually also African American. So there's a lot of magic involved in that. There is another project coming up very soon. And whenever the anthology is done, my work will be seen in a Llewellyn book that's due to come out. It should have come out the beginning of this year. It may be at the end of this year. It's an anthology of American folk magic. So you'll see me and some other local people here from the Detroit area in that anthology.
I love how perfectly this question about what are your ancestors demanding that you write, what is coming through, what are the stories that are pouring through you that you can kind of almost not help these days, was the question that Amy posed to Dr. Shiro while you were cut out, and then you came back with a story of stories coming through you. Last time Kenya and I spoke, it was so electric on the line. Everything kept shutting down and shutting off and coming back on, and there was helicopters going overhead. And she took me on the most electric auditory tour of what I'm now going to call Detroit Gothic, because I love that title from your friend. I do want to pass it over to Dr. Shiro with this question, and then let you take it from there, whether you want to jump in and ask each other follow-up questions or share more around this idea of what is coming through for you that needs to be told. Is that the best way to phrase it, Amy?
I just, again, wanted to give some honor to Valerie Boyd, who wrote Wrapped in Rainbows, the Zora Neale Hurston biography, and to reiterate again that she did that because Zora Neale Hurston told her to.
Right?
Yeah. So I want to know what everyone's ancestors are telling them to do, and hopefully we can facilitate.
Yeah. You know, that made me stop and think for a second, and I guess this is something good that we can open up on. So I don't, I mean, all of us, we have an ancestral system or a reverence or a practice. But lately meaning the past 10 years, I've been working more with lifetimes. And I tend to think of lifetimes as a kind of ancestry of the soul, right? So we're souls embodied, right? The soul transmigrates across the planet, across the cosmos, it's part of the cycle. And so I've been thinking a lot and meditating a lot and engaging a lot with myself as an ancestral soul, which is a venerable practice in a lot of traditions. And, you know, a lot of my New Age friends know what I'm talking about. I've been thinking about it in that way. I also like to think of collective ancestors. So we all have our personal lineages, we all have our family ancestors, the family dead. But one thing that seems to come up again and again and again, particularly whenever Black folk are together, are these collective, you know, again, in the language of the New Age or even of a kind of mystical science, you call them consciousnesses, right? The collective consciousness of the African ancestor. That's something I've been exploring, engaging a lot, and not just me. I see a lot of people talking about the great spirit of the collective ancestors. So, you know, my ancestors are really laid back. You know, they don't demand much of me except for, you know, some coffee and some food from time to time. But I'm very, very close to them. But these other realms, I feel like they're being drawn upon, and they are becoming part of the larger human collective consciousness. Now I'm using words from pop psychology, but I think all of you know what I'm talking about. That there, you know, we have our own dead, we have our own lineage that goes back to the beginning, but there's also an ancestral consciousness that all of us have as cultural groups, as tribes, as nations, as countries. That to me, there's a lot of action there. There's a lot of engagement and possibility there. So that's what I've been thinking about. But yeah, it's a beautiful moment because these worlds are coming together in ways that we just haven't seen. It's been prophesied that way, right? We live in cycles, but you can feel it, you can see it, you can, and it's very, very exciting. I'm not an Afro pessimist. This is the newest fashion among my academic peers. I'm actually, I guess if there's an optimist, an Afro optimist, the future is present. The past is present. It's all converging in this wonderful way. And I feel, I'm actually gonna choke up a little. I feel so grateful to be here on this planet, in this place right now. Because I didn't have to be, right? None of us, we could have, you know, we could be on Venus or something. But so grateful to be here. So ancestors aren't demanding that much. I think I'm demanding much of myself, but there's a lot going on for us to grasp, and that just gives me such joy. So I would love more reflections on that, and maybe to open it up if everyone has talked. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you again. Thank you.
You must have been reading my mind. The overwhelming message that is continuing to come through from my ancestral line is one of practicality. That there is a lot going on in this world right now, and that we should not be seduced by the illusory, and instead keep our feet firmly planted on the ground and partake of what we know is real. And that is everything from food to news to friendships and connections. The overwhelming response that I keep receiving is keep it real.
Well, we are living in interesting times. And the one thing that I agree with Caress about, not the one thing, but a thing that she just said that I seriously agree with is practicality. The thing about African spiritual traditions, once you strip away ritualized aspects, if there are any, once you strip that away, you're left with what is practical. What will help me feed my children? What will help me keep my job? What will help me keep a house, a roof over my head? What will help me live my best life in freedom and equality? It comes down to practicality. And what my wards are telling me right now is that this all has happened before and will happen again. It goes back to Dr. Thoreau talking about the non-linear aspect of our spiritual selves. We are these flesh bodies, but we are also spiritual entities living in these flesh bodies. And I find the concept of I am my own ancestor to be very enlightening and very fresh to me. I'm I'm processing that right now because I'm digging it. And my wards are telling me that when things look different, all of us who are freedom fighters are fighting for largely the same thing: the right to live and let live, the right to have gender and sexual freedoms, the right to have reproductive rights, our right to due process, our right to vote. All right. Our rights come in intersection with that. And what my wards are telling me is, remember that none of us are free until we all are free. So while I do concentrate on Black women, while I do teach what I know as an elder to younger women, to younger people in my tradition, it's because I want to raise them up with the understanding that freedom and liberty is a human right. And we should be fighting for those things without political affiliation. I know you heard me. I know all y'all heard me. Without political affiliation. If I believe in bodily autonomy, if I believe in my right to do with what I will with my body, then I must fight for other people's rights. And so right now, I am focusing on supporting those who are pressing forward for their rights. I have always been at the forefront. I'm getting too old now, but I've always been at the forefront of showing up at these protests, at all of these protests. I was there for Tawana Brawley in like 1996. I was marching during the Reagan years because we all know what was going on with that. And when the Iraq war started, I protested against it because I am a mother. And when the Iraq war protested, I still had a little one sleeping in the bed with me. Okay. As a feminine person, I want our children to come up healthy, to come up empowered, and to come up free. And for me, that is what Conjure does. Conjure speaks to the Conjure, which is another capital C for hoodoo. Conjure speaks to the practical aspects. And right now, my wards are saying we need practical protection for those who are freedom fighters. We need practical protections for those who are dissenters. What bothers me, I think, having been a protester now at one protest or the other for over 30 years, is that the common thread that I see developing over these years is that depending on whether you agree with the protest is how you paint the protesters. If there are largely Black, brown, and indigenous people in that protest, they are painted as thugs. If there are largely Caucasian people in a protest, they are painted as Nazis and white supremacists. All right. And so I am trying to look past the slurs and past the insults, and on a practical level, what is appropriate, what is liberating, what is freedom. And sometimes that's a very hard thing to square away, to reconcile with some of my other thinking. But what my ancestors are telling me right now is that I have to be on the right side of history in all of my endeavors. That's what my ancestors are saying to me right now. So practically speaking, I am teaching people how to magically set up their wards, what sort of herbal concoctions they need to be making for their protection baths, for their uncrossing baths, for their magical baths. I am teaching people what sort of liberation magic they need to do to keep the law away, what kind of liberation magic they need to do to hold on to their children. Because what's scaring me right now is that people want people to lose their livelihood. If they don't agree with your opinion, they want, and when I say they, I mean people who don't agree want the other people to lose their livelihoods. They want the people they don't agree with to lose their children. They want the people who they don't agree with to lose their homes and their means of taking care of themselves. And to me, no matter who you're pointing that at, that's injustice. I can't wink my eye at one set of injustice and then turn around and say, but rah, 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 liberty and justice for all. For all means all. And I know I can spell all, A-O-A-L-L. Oh my God, A-L-L. All right. So this is my feeling, because I have always stood up for the underdog, no matter where they're coming from. You know, I've always stood up for the underdog, and it's important for me to teach those who are coming behind me, because someday they will be recognizing me as their ancestor. Someday I will be, if I have lived a good life, if I have done what I can for my people, my descendants will have my picture on their ancestor altars and will be asking me for my wisdom from beyond, because I do not believe in linear time. I believe that we all keep coming back. And that's why our ancestors can reach to us from a non-linear perspective and give us that wisdom that they have gained just by living their lives. So I'm trying to keep my work very, very practical. I'm trying to make, I deal with a lot of sex workers. I'm trying to make sure that they're safe on the job. I'm trying to make sure that my clients have enough to eat and that they know the magical things to do to increase their prosperity. So they know what they need to do magically to hang on to their jobs. So they know what they need to do magically, that when they send their children out every day, those children return home to them. That to me is my spiritual practice, is dealing with, we call them the needs or the deficiencies of everyday life, and finding a way to fill those needs. And that's what my ancestors are calling upon me to do right now, is to fill those needs primarily, and then secondarily to teach my ways to the next generation, so that someday they can look on me and call me a good and elevated ancestor. And so that someday I can come back and continue this work in the future in a different flesh bag. That's what I'm up to these days.
Zoe, I saw you having full body reactions to some of that. Do you wanna respond and tell us what your ancestors are telling you to do?
Sure. Well, like Dr. Shiro, my ancestors don't really, they don't really require a lot from me, keeping my altars and things like that. But actually what I've been doing for the past 4 years now, maybe 5, I've actually been involved in a practice called nowelism. And so a lot of it is based on clearing the bloodline and shedding. So I've been in a process of shedding a lot of the things that live in DNA. And we work with a set of, animales. And so it's interesting because I feel like all the other practices that I've been engaged in have prepared me for this piece. And just recently, I've actually gone back to work that I hadn't done in a while, which is working with the angelic realm. And so I've been doing this shedding, because the thing about the ancestor piece is not all of our ancestors, a lot of us have mixed heritage. And so a lot of the things that we come up against could be because we have some ancestor that might not believe we're supposed to be here to prosper. They might not believe that women, identified people should work. They may not be a person of color and might actively be blocking our path. And then we go into circle with other people, then we bring all their people in and we don't know them either, right? And so I've actually pulled myself out of like ancestor combining for the past 4 years so I could cleanse and cleanse and cleanse and cleanse. And so now I've been back on, bringing in this angelic work and cleansing across lifetimes. And that's something that I've been working with my students as well, is going back and getting the fragmented pieces of ourselves. And because I've been in domestic violence work and sexual assault work for 20 years, so we know that things happen to the body where a lot of times we're checked out and, we're disassociated. So a lot of the work that I do is bringing people back into their bodies and helping them to see that magic is possible. I think a big thing for me also is the joy piece, the happiness piece, and the laughter piece. Because one of the things I found in social movements is, I feel like it's changing, but for me, it's always been like the hardest worker, the last one in the office, the last one at the protest. Like I've been that person, and it's largely, I found, it's Black and brown women that are doing that work. And we find ourselves very sick at the end of our lives, and our folks of color counterparts are like going on to have insurance and just having very lovely lives. And we find ourselves passing away alone, not having healthcare and things like that. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing with younger people is to help redefine what activism looks like, redefine what social consciousness looks like, to actually, it's okay to center yourself. It's okay to say no. It's okay to not be in every group. It's okay to not answer every email. And again, this is all of the shedding, because I just feel like, and have experienced the sucking, the extraction of our happiness, our joy, our health, again, and then we're just like shells of a people, then they're on to like the next brown or Black person to extract from. And so I'm really working to restructure that narrative for people, restructure this idea about resistance and this like narrative of resistance, because for me, what we resist persists. And so I'm just, just wanting to shift some things for people and for myself, and just constantly have an expanded view and not be so attached to what happens here on Earth, because Earth isn't the final say. So it's like, how can I attach to the clouds? How can I attach to whatever is beyond, beyond, beyond? How can I gain strength from that? Where's the magic in that also? So the thing about, my learnings around manifestation, one of the things I learned early on was that you had to be able to feel the thing, a frequency of the thing that you want to manifest, because of the shame, because of the guilt, because of the collective consciousness, because of the trauma. These are things that we have to break through to be able to get, believing that you deserve it, believing that it's possible for you, which are all the things that, the myth of white supremacy culture has tried to, right? All the things I pray, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why can I not break through? And so for me, it's like, let's break through.
have so many thoughts on this. Yes, all of that. Yes. So I recently did a lot of interviews for my dissertation. And I spoke with this Black witch, Jujube Sam, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and also this woman, Black witch, Iyalosha Oshunyemi Akalatunde, who is also a wonderful Black witch. Oh yeah, so y'all love her too. She's fantastic. And I've been thinking about this too, along like manifestation and Jujube says, Sam says, just we need to cultivate a thought as Black folks. We need to cultivate the thought in us of you deserve, baby, of you deserve the good things. You deserve the house, you deserve the car, you deserve the healthy romantic relationships, you deserve all of the good things in life. Because often, anti-Blackness teaches us that we don't deserve these things, that we're unworthy. I struggle with that myself. But so I wanted to read this quote that I'm actually writing. Is from Iyalosha Oshunyemi. She says, so she's a Ifa practitioner. And in Ifa, practitioners, myself included, believe that your ori, your spirit, your ancestor, your spirit, intuition, maybe some people call it, connects with Olodumare, God, and says, you make a deal about your destiny. This is what I'm going to be doing this is what I'm agreeing to for my lifetime, right? And then you come out and, to life and do these things. So she says, so you make this agreement with God, with Olodumare, before ascending to earth. And she says, before you were born, you laid out a life for yourself. You don't have to worry if you deserve it. You already gave it to yourself before you got here. So getting it is a matter of remembering that it's yours, not thinking people who look like me don't get to have this. The Odu, the sacred text, says no one can bless you without the consent of your ori. We'd be blocking ourselves. When you stop, you realize there's a life that you knew you were supposed to have. She said, my mother told me that when I had my first child, she says, quote, it's only your prayers that will feed this house and this child. Don't let anyone make you think that that's your husband, your job, or the money that you receive. She said, whenever you're down to your last and you don't know what you're supposed to do, then pray and it'll come to you. And truly like magic, it will be there. She says, what we owe the universe is the fulfillment of this destiny. But to do that, our needs must be met. She says, I gotta live by the beach. I can't fulfill it nowhere else. But you're scared to say that. And once you say that, the universe is like, you're right. That was our agreement. Here you go, the house by the ocean. But too often it's us waiting for someone else's approval when they don't have anything to do with it. Right. So she's saying it's not the job, it's not the man, it's not the partner, it's none of that. None of that. It's the power is within ourselves. And these are tricky concepts to grab to talk about, right? Because we don't want to lean into that prosperity gospel that tells us that it's our fault if we don't have the things that we have. I mean, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, right? We're here, this is real. This oppression is real. And so we don't want to lean into that. We don't want to lean into new age kind of ideas that we are only that maybe we're doing something wrong or we're out of alignment or like we're to blame. I think there's a new way. We have to think about this. We have to think about manifesting the worlds that we want to create and the worlds that we want to have for ourselves with a Black feminist framework in mind, with and an Africana religious framework too. And I think it's happening. But I'm definitely think that's the message I'm thinking through right now. How do we parse out the toxic capitalism from the very real need and very real, I would say, truth, in my opinion, of God is good, right? Of the ancestors supporting us, of the abundance that is possible.
I want to thank you so much for bringing Elosa into the circle. She's never been on the show, and now I'm like, I'm going to email her like tomorrow. I quoted her book in our first book. Ona Agbani was an amazing teacher for me, and Elosa herself. So listeners, Instagram.com/got2be ocean. That's the number 2 and the letter U, ocean. Definitely check out Elosa's work. Thank you again for bringing her to this circle.
Kenya, do you want to tell us what your ancestors are telling you to do, or respond to anything that's been said so far? I'd love to hear from you again if you do.
So right now, and I don't want to say just right now as in the last, month or so, but in the last, I want to say 3-year arc has been an ever increasing movement toward re-embracing my original path, which is, agrarian. It's always been agrarian. And when I say that, I've always cycled with the agrarian calendars, not the Gregorian calendar. I live my life by the moon, we plan by the sun. That's one of the, that's a paraphrase of the actual saying from the Black Moon Grove. I remember when I first started the Black Moon Grove and I had my students, I told them we live our lives by the sun. We plan our days by the sun, we live our lives by the moon. And one of the reasons I had said that was because I felt that we needed to connect not necessarily with the European version of the moon cycles, but what those moon times meant, which is why the calendars that I used, I felt inspired that I had to use indigenous calendars to this area. It's been everything from learning indigenous language, because as we know, English is a foreign language, to indigenous practices. And when I say indigenous, I don't just mean people from Turtle Island. I mean, when I can, my far back as I can go, African traditions, specifically African American. When I would visit down south, I would try to keep track of where the graves were off the plantations, because there were no headstones when I was younger. It was just a lot of grass, and you had to remember how many steps from the road was the first grave. And then you had to remember how many steps from that grave was the next grave. I had to look at the grass to remember what the grass looks like when it grows over a grave. That all ties into the fact that for me, even from the book, from the festivals being outside that I hold, everything has been getting back to the magic of the land. Eventually, I've always stated, that I wanted to have a small shop, planting herbs and whatnot, but it's beyond that. I want to get involved in making resource wells for communities that don't have water so it can be clean. I mean, come on, I live in the state with Flint. I live in the state with the Isabella Indian Reservation. I want to get back to planting trees, but not the trees you would think. I understand, it's popular to plant, cherry trees, grapevines, whatnot, but I want to plant nanny berries. I want to see velvet leaf grow and thrive for cordage. I want to teach people how to make their own cordage. And I have done these things. I have taught this to my students. I have taught this to my friends. I have taught these things to my mentees. I am watching a revival of back to the land and permaculture, and the people who are involved are magical and spiritual people. And that's where my ancestors are pushing me. That's what the original instructions were. Every land has original instructions. If you are not native to that land, you bring the knowledge and the DNA of the original instructions from the land that you traveled from, and it unites in the blood that you carry with the indigenous and original instructions you have in the land where you are, which places you as a permanent sojourner, but also as a resident of the land as well. And as one, you have a responsibility as a magical and a mystical person to care for the land, not only on a physical level and on an agrarian level, but on a magical and spiritual level. That's something that I'm drawn back to. Even with classes, I've limited the amount of classes that I teach, the amount of festivals that I throw, because I had to do a great reset just to get people back to the point of at the end of the day, our bodies move with the tides. We came from this earth. We will return to this earth. We are of the earth. And because of that, we have a certain responsibility to learn how to cohabit with the other creatures on this earth, the four-legged, the winged, the crawled, the swimmers, the green people. All of these things were put here to accomplish certain goals. And if I'm going to drop something, if we're really here to talk today, let me drop something really fast. One of the hardest lessons that I've had to teach, and that I find myself going back to it over and over, is that whether you believe we are creations to be made to take care of things, or whether you believe that the gods of the divine are there to take care of us, no matter what your belief system is, when we look at these different embodiments of life on this planet, even down to the stones, you have to understand that for some of us, we don't see them as disconnected to us. These are spirits, or these are emanations that chose to incarnate and survive and serve on this world and in this world on their journey in that capacity. If they chose to be a tree as a standing person, that's what they chose. So how dare we indiscriminately clear cut and burn down anything without purpose? Yes, they gave themselves in sacrifice for us to be able to use them, according to some beliefs. But we also have to know that gluttony and greed and rampant exploitation for no good purpose is not part of our original instructions. And the magician, the witch, the spirit worker, the priest, the priestess, whatever you call yourself, is a little bit to the side and a little bit to the front when it comes down to reminding people and reminding ourselves that there are actually original instructions. And our job is to not only care for this creation, to live in this creation, to continue forward through this creation, but to teach and assist in the creation and help maintain it. And magic is one of the ways we do that. And in order to practice magic, you have to be aware. In order to have that awareness, you have to know your path. And for me, one day I will probably walk into a wood and disappear. You might find pieces, but that's what's going to happen. And all woods aren't made of trees. Sometimes woods are the artificial woods we create with urban landscapes. And our job is not just to be of that place, but to help the peoples in that place, whatever they look like, whatever form they take. That means sometimes being on the front line with Detroit Will Breathe and covering that as press. And sometimes for me, that means teaching people how to cook. And sometimes for me, that means teaching people a healthy dose of ethics and how to develop their moral matrix when they came to me for something as simple as a love magic class. Because what you want wasn't what you needed, but I'm going to give you what you get. And that's what I was told to give you. But I digress. That's pretty much what my ancestors are telling me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kenya. I always feel so emotional when I listen to you speak. So many of you, actually, all of you who were here with us today had moments of just transcendence. I hope that when you listened to each other and you felt that electricity move through you of how powerful that woman's voice was, you know that we had that when you spoke too. That we were shook when you spoke, that we were weepy when you spoke, that we were given courage and strength when you spoke, that we were humbled when you spoke. I hope that each of you knows that we had that experience when you spoke too, and that we are honored and thankful to have you here. If anybody has any last words or blessings, I will open the floor one final time before we close this spiral, only to reopen it again, I hope, together soon.
I will just say something really quick. This is
Nadra. Thank you. Yes.
In terms of ancestors, my ancestry is somewhat unique in that my mother's line, they're African Americans, and then my father is Nigerian, from the Yoruba people. And I think the message that that I hear as I get older is just that a lot of the history, the traditions, the practices that we think have been lost, have not been. And I think often in popular culture, when we talk about those connections between African Americans and West Africans, there is this pervasive idea that so much was lost. And I think kind of being the embodiment in some ways of both of those lineages, I find that not to be true, in the sense that my parents actually got divorced when I was young, and I grew up more with the African American side than with my Nigerian side. And I will, despite that, I will still have kind of ways of thinking, a cosmology, the term that I use in my book, that really reflect this Nigerian way of thinking that I was never formally taught, but somehow I still know those practices, despite the fact that in addition to not being taught those, my father doesn't really identify with those kind of indigenous Nigerian practices. Most of my family is either Christian or Muslim from Nigeria, and yet they still live through. So I think that's a message that I feel that my ancestors share, is that this history is alive. It lives in all of us, and the transatlantic slave trade did not, sever us from those customs.
Marceline, I see you shaking your head. Do you want to have the final word? Oh, I see you shaking your head only with like agreement, because that feeling, we've talked about it before, that feeling that like, no, it's not lost, it's here.
Yeah, I was just agreeing. I mean, it's all throughout, all through voodoo, all through all of our practices, and it's exciting. It's exciting that this, I think it's a new consciousness of remembering of our practices is coming back.
Thanks. What else can we say? We'll have you back again. We'll be uplifted. I'm going to share this blessing from the great Lucille Clifton. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water waving forever. And may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for your grace, all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You all.
Thanks, everyone.
Blessed fucking be.
Big love, everyone.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is brought to you by the Missing Witches Coven. Join us right now on patreon.com/missingwitches. Blessed fucking be.